Alright, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Riders Live presents Joseph Binder. I am Christina Warnish. I'm the System-Wide Adult Activities Coordinator for Palm Beach County Library System. Thank you all for being here today. As mentioned, this is part of our Riders Live series, which is now in its 17th year of connecting readers and authors. We have events going all the way through April, and we do have our February events flyer at one of our back tables over there. Please feel free to grab it on your way out after the event. I'd like to recognize the Friends of the Palm Beach County Library. This event would not be possible without their support. Thank you to anyone that is already a Friends member. If you are interested in joining or interested in making a donation, we do have some brochures also at the back if you'd like to take one of those. And I'd also like to thank our friends at Classic Bookshop, which is our local bookseller for today. We do have copies of Joe's current novel, The Oligarch's Daughter, available for purchase, along with a book signing to conclude the event. And a little bit about our special guest. Joseph Binder is a New York Times best-selling author of 16 suspense novels. His books have won numerous awards, including the Strand Critics Award for Best Novel for Buried Secrets, the International Thriller Writers Award for Best Novel for Killer Instinct, and the Barry Award for Best Thriller for Company Man. The Boston Globe has called him a master of modern thriller. 2 of his novels have been made into major motion pictures, including High Crimes, adapted into the hit 2002 movie starring Ashley Judd and Morgan Freeman, famously, and Paranoia, the 2013 film starring Harrison Ford, Gary Oldman, and Liam Hemsworth. He is a founding member of the International Thriller Writers, as well as a member of the Council of Foreign Relations and the Association of Former Intelligence Officers. Joe is a graduate of Yale and the Harvard Russian Research Center, and he currently lives in Boston. Oline Cogdil, who is our moderator for today, reviews mystery fiction for the Sun Sentinel in Fort Lauderdale and Tribune Publishing Wire, Publishers Weekly, and Shelf Awareness. She has been honored with the Raven Award for the Mystery Writers of America. Oline is in her 8th year as a judge for the Los Angeles Times Book Prize in the Mystery Thriller category. Oline also has an essay on reviewing in the Anthony, Agatha, and Barry award-winning book, How to Write a Mystery, co-edited by Lee Child and Your Our King. And without further ado, please give a warm welcome to Joseph Binder and Oline Cogdil.
Okay. Hi there. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. First of all, I love this event. It's one of my favorites of the year. I'm going to be doing about 4 more of them, so you may get tired of me. I want to thank you all. Thank you for being readers. Thank you for being supporting libraries.
Moving like a place.
Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for being readers. Thank you for supporting libraries. And hopefully you can buy books. I hope you can. I love this event. I'll be back in a couple of weeks. And Jeff, we've known each other for years. We've been on panels together. I've interviewed you before. Welcome to South Florida.
I'm from Boston, so it's really nice to be here. Extra special to be in 80-degree weather. This is the last stop on my tour. I go back home tomorrow and pass together the snow.
I'd like to start these interviews by touching the audience and you back to the start of your careers. Now, your first book was not fiction, it was nonfiction. And it was called Red Carpet, the connection between the Kremlin and America's most powerful businessman. And it was about Dr. Armand Hammer and his ties to Soviet intelligence. Why this book there?
Well, I was a grad student studying Russian studies, and I was at the dentist's, and I read the People magazine, the article about Dr. Armand Hammer. the CEO of Occidental Petroleum, known as the Kremlin's favorite capitalist. But at the same time, I was reading the letters of Lenin in Russian, that real page turner, and I found a letter from Lenin to Comrade on the camera. And I knew that when a Soviet leader called you comrade, that meant you were a member of the Communist Party. I thought, this is really interesting. You know, what kind of person to be a member of the Communist Party as well as the Kremlin's favorite capitalist. I didn't get that. So I got a book contract. I went to Moscow, and while I was in Moscow doing research, I tracked down an old guy who told me he was Armand Hammer's KGB handler. So when I put this in the book, Dr. Hammer was not very happy with it. He was a very powerful guy, and he threatened me with a libel suit, which of course he wasn't. Anyone's lawyer in him is not that actually suing for libel. That's crazy. But so what he did instead, because he had his people go around the country and buy up as many copies of the book as they could about the market. So it's something really well. Yeah, exactly.
Going to another printing place?
No, the publisher was scared. But it was big, not doing any more copies.
So it's a part of you that kind of helps you.
The guy said.
You kind of moved into fiction then, and your first novel was The Monster Love, which was 1991. That was about KGB code. And the second novel, Extraordinary Powers, 1994, was about discovery on the Soviet wall in the CIA.
Right.
Tell us about why this world fascinated you.
Wow. So I really wanted to write fiction. I've written a nonfiction book. I just accused one of the most powerful businessmen in the world of being a KGB agent. And I was afraid to write fiction. I was afraid to write a novel. So I had read, I was looking widely on thrillers. I'd read Robert Buzzbone, the Born Identity in the Battery Circle, the Tribute Foresight. And I realized, I know this stuff, this Russian stuff, and I could write a novel using my Russian expertise. So I wrote my first novel in Moscow, published about a coup against Gorbachev. And it came out 6 months before the actual coup happened in 1991. So it was on Good Morning America, and they wanted to know how prescient but I looked into it really. But you never no. But so in the 1990s, though, people were not interested in reading about Russia. We didn't know what to make of Russia. Were they an ally? Were they a friend? Were they an enemy? What was going on? People couldn't figure it out. So I started going with other kinds of novels that were not Russian related. And it wasn't until the Oligarch's daughter that I decided to go back to run on Russia. And it's been kind of like a homecoming for me. I read Russian, I speak Russian, I wasn't fluent, and I know this stuff well. I've been to Moscow in the meantime at this. And I was kind of jazzed, really, to write this book that had a Russian.
Is it true that you were recruited to join the CIA?
Yes.
He told me that.
Yes. But, I was a Russian studies major at Yale, and that was a field that was, there. And so I thought about it, and then I realized I learned that I would be sitting at a cubicle
CIA, translating Soviet economic journals from Russian to English. Done for no facts, so I can make it up.
And you were somebody published around the 90s.
Yeah,
But your breakout book really was Paranoia.
right.
And that was in 2004. And it went on the New York Times bestseller. It had a national marketing campaign. It's a very sexy premise. It's about a young man who has a very low-level job. He pulls the prank, almost loses his job. But he can save this job if he becomes an undercover spy in a rival company. Why this book? What was the premise? What was the idea? And why did it take off so well?
Well, why it took off, I don't know. I think people like the twist, and it's got a pretty good twist. I was really interested I became interested in corporate espionage as I realized that some of the bigger companies hire ex-CIA and in some cases ex-KGB agents to work for them. And they use the same techniques as they do in global espionage. So I sort of thought this was something that hadn't been done before. But also, this was the first time that I really wrote a novel in my own voice. So it took me a while to figure this out. But when I finally had my own style, I felt prepared. My agent had told me before to keep humor out of the suspense. But as Harlan Coben will tell you, and that's okay. It's okay to be fun and suspense. Get out.
We need that levity.
Yeah, you need to have it sort of brings up reaction. So, I don't know. I had a great publisher, and they just really broke this book out. They really worked their butts off to make this a New York Times bestseller.
Well, they simply did in a movie, and it's still selling, I believe.
Yeah.
It also, I think, established a blueprint for your book. High action, high concept thriller, thinking about something that just is terrific. And also, you look at ordinary people caught up in something way beyond their grasp and not sure how to deal with it.
Right.
And talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, that's sort of the premise of most of my books. Ordinary people caught up in extraordinary circumstances. And that was Paranoia. That's been pretty much every book since then, including the Oligarch story. We have a regular guy, and he works for a hedge fund. He's a regular guy. He speaks a little Russian from college, and he meets this woman, falls in love with her. Without knowing she's the daughter of a Russian oligarch. And then his life sort of turns upside down. And the FBI comes a call.
Explain it. I can tell you, I love this book. I'm reviewing it for Self-Awareness, which is an online review site. And hasn't been published yet, but I called it in my review, I called it exterior, action-packed story with equal parts political thriller and romance. I think that kind of sums it up.
Thank you.
And what I loved about it is, when he meets Tatiana, he thinks she's just, a regular struggling photographer, lives in a down-market Greenwich Village apartment. She lives a very simple lifestyle, has a little dog, and then he gets invited to her family's house, to her party. And that is luxurious. I'm going out on them here. I think that no one in this group has ever had that much wealth in their family. It's a great idea. Tell us about the idea, how it came about, and it's more than guy meets girl and then meets her family.
Right. So yeah, I think of this book as a chase novel and a love story.
Absolutely.
And I was fascinated since I spent all over Russia, when all of these Russian billionaires started coming over to the West, to London, which is now called Londongrad, right? And New York is buying up mansions and yachts, and private jets, and they would donate generously to hospitals and museums and schools. And there would be, the Tate Museum has a wing building named after one oligarch. These guys were like merchant princes. And so I thought, this could be a really interesting situation. We have a regular person caught up in this world of incredible wealth and intrigue. And then Russia invaded Ukraine while I was working at the book. And I thought, oh crap, that's getting used to it. Because the oligarchs were all of a sudden sanctioned. They were on the run. Their yachts were sinking. And I thought, I had to put the book down. Until I thought about it, realized that in two timelines, I had one before this war happens and one today, that could make it actually more interesting and deeper and richer. So it turned out the invasion worked out okay. Thanks, Glenn.
I stay in this book, and it's a very suspenseful, it's also very tense to read. As a thriller, anything can happen. Unlike a mystery series, figured heroes and just don't come back. We don't know what is going to happen here.
Right, standalone.
And I also love the fact that there was never any doubt that Paul and Tatiana really loved each other.
Right.
But there's all these other circumstances in there. So, tell me what about that relationship.
Yeah, in each one of my books, I try to do something conventional. And I hadn't really done a love story before. And so I worked a lot on this. And I wanted him to really be in love with this woman. And I wanted her to be a good person and not a poor little rich girl. So she's a photographer. She lives in this sort of crappy apartment in the East Village. And she doesn't want to be known as the daughter of an oligarch. She's really kind of concealing that part of her life. And Paul's friends warned him that she's a gold digger. And until he finds out the truth.
And also, you make this world so real. I really felt like I was at these parties. So tell us, how much caviar did you eat? How many yachts did you sail on or buy? And how many $5,000 suits did you purchase? It's all research.
All research and you write it off, right? Actually, I've never been on a yacht. But I did track down a captain of a super yacht who was hired by oligarchs to captain their yachts. And he turned out to be a great source. He had all kinds of stories. He told me about the oligarchs he worked for and their passengers and how they had tanks of lobsters. And they had, in some cases, they had a submarine down in the bowels of the yacht. So he told me all kinds of great details that I could use to make the yacht scenes feel as real as possible.
What was the submarine used for?
Yes. When the oligarch wants to show his passengers the bottom of the sea.
Of course.
Right? Why not?
Like that. I also got, were there other stories that surprised you that he talked to you about?
Oh, yeah. I have there are a number of scenes that take place in the yacht where it's sort of behind the state.
Yeah.
Which I got up in this town.
That you can divulge?
Well, the thing is, there's a great scene that I wrote that had to cut out for piercing reasons, which I plan to use in another book. because I hate to waste.
I got very hungry reading your book. Because there really are some great scenes with food. These luscious buffets and just like, oh my goodness, it's like King Henry VIII and, the rounding board thing.
Yeah.
So do you research on that?
Yeah. But I was telling Oline that I went to, was in Tampa 2 nights ago. I went to Burns Steakhouse.
Yeah.
Man, that was great. I did my food research. I want to get the details right.
Did you have anything favorite that you discovered?
No, but Arkady, the oligarch, takes Paul aside when he first meets him. Paul's eating some caviar and realizes he doesn't like caviar. So the guy wipes his mouth out with the napkin. And the oligarch sees this and brings him into the kitchen and says, "What you need is a bit of pastrami scent." So he's like pastrami and passes dough in the door.
I love that scene. When you write about him, you show us a public face of the billionaire and then a very private face.
Yeah.
Talk about that dichotomy.
Yeah. I wanted us to see the complexity of this guy. And not just he's a bad guy and sick and sinister. I wanted him to be, what's a great Yiddish word? Hamish? I wanted him to be a family-loving, humble guy in a lot of ways as well. Paul comes from a kind of a cold, small family. His mother died when he was young, and his father is kind of a lunatic.
Yeah.
And he doesn't really have a home. And he sees this, he's really attracted to Tatiana's home life and her family and the father. And the father really takes a shine to him. He kind of invites him into his business. And this is when the FBI takes a real interest.
Well, was there anything that, like, in your research that really surprised you about this world? Either the wealthy world, the political world?
Well, I can't say I was necessarily surprised because I read a lot and I talked to, it's not that I interviewed oligarchs because nobody would call themselves an oligarch. I talked to people who were, you consider oligarch adjacent, and I was really interested in the connections that some of these guys have with the Kremlin, where we don't know exactly how close they are to Putin. But by the way, it's not named in my book. That was a deliberate decision.
Yeah.
Oh, that's sweet. Yeah. I'll tell you that actually, I got a story about that to explain why I didn't name Putin in my book. So I was a while ago, I was on Russian TV, RTTV, which is broadcast around the world in English. I'm into Russia. And I sort of thought, this is an interesting opportunity. I can say whatever I want. Because we were talking about spies, and I started talking about how corrupt the Russian Secret Services are. The anchor woman kept trying to cut me off. And I talked about how corrupt Putin is. He's probably the richest man in the world. And at that point, they cut me off. Ended the interview. So, a few months later, I go into my office in Boston, which is not in my home, it's across the street. And I sit down at my computer, and I reach for my mouse, and the mouse is missing. I thought, this is weird. So I went to the other room where my assistant has a computer and a mouse, and her mouse was missing too. And then I noticed that the backup drives were missing. And nothing else of value was taken. The backup drives and the computer mice. So I called a private eye friend of mine, Jake Brewer, whose sister is actually in the audience here. And I said, how could anyone have got here? I mean, I have 2 locks on the doors. And Jay said, send me a picture of the locks, which I did. And he said, I could pick those in about a minute and a half.
That's my dad.
So I called in a friend of mine who worked for the FBI in counterintelligence and told him what had happened. And he showed up at my office. The first thing he said was, were you on Russian TV a while back? Yeah. And you talked about how corrupt Putin is? Yeah. I said, maybe that wasn't so bright. He told me that the Russians hire out local talent. They hire emigres to do what's called a black bag job. So I said, okay, I get why they stole my backup drives. They want to see who my sources are. Why did they take the computer mice? And he said, so you'd notice.
Yeah.
So from that point on, I've been very careful about not making my notes.
Had you a lot of work in progress when there in New England?
I mean, backup drives. I had it backed up to the cloud. I didn't lose anything. I'm very careful of my CIA sources. I have to protect them.
Right.
So I don't have their full names in my files. Just the person.
On the other end of the uber wealthy, you have the survivalists.
Yes.
And there's a lot of scenes about your hero who's on the run and has to learn how to survive in the wilderness with nothing.
Right.
Let's talk about that.
Yeah. So Paul actually goes into hiding after he gets into trouble with the Oligarch. He goes into hiding. And I talked to some sources about how to disappear. How do you disappear in today's world with facial recognition and CCTV cameras and LinkedIn and Google? How do you disappear? It's no longer possible to disappear in a big city because there are too many cameras. He told me the way to disappear is to go to a small town where they don't have cameras. So I picked a town in New Hampshire. It disappears there, sets up a whole different life for about 5 years until he's discovered. And he goes on the run. And he goes into the forest, the White Mountain Forest in New Hampshire. All he has with him is his go bag with essentials. And so to write these scenes, I talked to a couple of wilderness specialists who took me into the woods in January. It was freezing cold. And one was in Northeast, I don't know. Anyway, they took me into the woods. These 2 guys did. And they told me, for example, how to make a fire, which is not rubbing 2 sticks together. But if you want a flint, a knife, they taught me how to do that. And pretty soon I was doing fires using birch bark. And he's trying to figure out how to tell direction without a compass. All of these things were techniques the wilderness guys taught me how to do. So that's a pretty research. Those scenes are pretty well researched.
But there was no caviar.
No, he's on the run, there's no caviar. He decided there's nothing to eat squirrel meat either. So he goes on.
When you start a book, what is your process?
Well, I start with the premise of what if. In this case, it was, what if a regular guy gets caught up in the world of Russian oligarch? So I start brainstorming, and I do research at the same time. The research gives me ideas. And then I don't do a full outline of the book. I outline the whole book I lose interest in going. I want to keep it as spontaneous as possible. And I've learned that if I surprise myself, I'll be surprised in the reader. My agent used to represent Robert Ludlum. And Ludlum once told me to outline the whole thing, he would do outlines of 150 single-spaced type pages. And I tried that with one book, and by the time I was done, I did not want to write the book.
And Jeffrey Beaver does that too.
He does a full outline, yeah. Every writer works differently, right? So then I do research along the way. Like, I was working, I realized I had to have a yacht sim. And not having good on the yacht, that's when I tracked down my yacht captain. So, super yacht captain. With my research, I made the yacht scenes feel real to me as much as possible. So I basically do my outlining for the first part, then I just sort of veer off and do whatever surprises me.
How much did Helen and Peter's character that's influence you?
I try to do, I want to write a book that is not going to make much. So I don't want to have too many current events figure in, but just enough. So the war in Ukraine happens in this book, but it's the background. Because I'm really focusing on Paul and his struggle to survive.
What's the best part of being a writer?
Yeah.
Well, a couple things. One is, I think it's really cool to get paid to make things up. Kind of an amazing job. Think about it. That's a real privilege. And the other thing I really love, I was just talking to Oline about this before, is I love meeting readers. We sit there in a room alone, and then all of a sudden you're on book tour and I meet people who've read the book. And that's very exciting to me.
I was just going to ask you about the response you get from readers.
Yeah.
Just has any email or encounter or letter stood out?
No, I get a fair number of emails and I answer them all. When I was a kid, I discovered in the Albany Public Library a novel called The Wonderful Flight to the Mushroom Planet. And I loved this book. I turned my friends onto it. I loved it so much that I wrote a letter to the author. And a few months later, I got back a form letter, but it had her return address. So I sent her directly a letter. Just wait for me. Sent her a letter saying, "You haven't answered my questions." And I had all these questions, and she answered me with a 2-page typed letter. And this is what made me become a writer. This is my first realization that behind every novel is a person making this up. So, and years later, she came to Cambridge, to Radcliffe, to get awards. And I invited Ellen and Cameron over to get it. I told her, "You make me a writer." So that's why I answered the email.
It's great. Enough not just an hour.
Very beneficial. Yeah, from the
And for you,
yeah.
and for everyone who read about it, every picks up a book and realize it. I think somebody wrote this.
Somebody wrote this. This is a job. Some people have. My parents were not thrilled. They told me I wanted to be a lawyer. But I became a writer. As soon as I started making a living at it, they said, "This is okay."
As a writer, what are you most proud of?
That was a tough question.
Good.
I am most proud of fooling the reader. Because, I've got smart readers. They've read a lot of books. And they know all the tricks. And I love that I finally ready twists that the reader did not see coming. I'm proud.
I don't believe that. It's really, during the course of writing a novel or a series, characters have to change. They have to have an arc. They change. I would think that in the matter of the career of a writer, the writer has to change.
Yeah.
As they're coming. How have you changed from your first book or even from your last book?
We all change. I think all those writers change as we write. I've written now 17 novels. This is my 17th. And I am much more character focused now than I used to be. And I really started with paranoia. I realized the importance of a character, how we, the reader, have to ally ourselves with a character. It's not that you have to necessarily like the character, we have to admire the character. So I am much more character-centric. I'm much more aware of prose now than I used to be. I used to sort of write. Now I sort of think, is that a good sentence? Is that a good paragraph? I've got a sign above my computer that says, reverse, reveal, surprise. Every chapter I write has to reverse the story in some way, take us back, surprise, so reveals.
Yeah.
So I would say what I've learned as a writer is to be more aware of the prose, make sure the prose sounds good to your ear. So I read everything out loud as I'm reading. And I focus a lot on the characters. The characters feel more melodical to me. Paul became really real to me as a character.
Mm-hmm.
And Tatiana.
You root for those. You have to.
Yeah.
I feel that I of course have to like the main characters, but I certainly have to be interested in what they're going to do.
Right.
Be invested.
Right. I admire them in some way.
Now you find out like 4 or 5 books about Nick Halleck.
Yes.
Will you ever go back to him?
I think I will. We are right now finishing a negotiation for TV rights to a Nick Heller's TV series.
Oh, good.
And if that happens, my publisher is going to be very interested in doing that. I know how it works. Right. But I am starting a new series with my new book. And I've got a guy who took the CIA buyout. And investigates private case. So I love writing Nick Heller. It's interesting, writing a series versus writing a standalone. I've written both, standalones and series novels. When you write a series, the character has to be an investigator at one time or another.
Mm-hmm.
When you write a standalone, the character can be anybody, anything, and the character's life can turn upside down. But you can't do that in a series. You can't have the main character, have his life turned upside down, or life turned upside down in book after book. It's just not plausible.
Too exhausting.
Exhausting, yeah. So they are very different kinds of books. But I like both of them. I like writing series as well as I like writing standalones.
Is it more difficult for a series? Because I mean, you starting from scratch.
Starting from scratch is difficult because you have to have a character who is built for the long haul.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody who can have case after case after case. Plausibly. Have a reason to investigate his case. So, but once you've written the first book in a series, it's in a lot of ways easier to write the ones that follow. Because you already set up the main character and the family and the characters surrounding the main character you've done that work already with characterization. So you just plunge right in. And people love reading serious characters. I get a lot of emails from people saying, are you going to bring back this such and such a character? And if it's standalone, I say, no. I visited enough hell upon this character. I'm not going to bring him back to do it to him again.
Let them rest.
Right, let him rest.
Is there anything you won't write about?
Sure. I will not write about children in trouble. It just, since I have a daughter and raised her, I can't do that. I won't do violence against women just because that really bothers me. I think it's too many writers do it, and it does not appeal to me and it bothers me. So those are two things that I won't write about.
Who do you read?
Well, I read a lot. Nelson DeMille was one of my favorites.
Yes.
No one ever read The Gold Coast?
Yeah.
I mean, how great is that book?
Yeah.
Fantastic. I love that book. I actually became a friend of Nelson. And I'm sorry that Nelson has passed away. But The Gold Coast, in some ways, inspired the Oligarch's daughter, where you sort of see that glimpse of great wealth and terror at the same time. So I read Nelson, I read Michael Connelly, I read everything he writes. I read Harlan Coben. There's a lot. I mean, there's a lot of good writers out there. Yeah.
So many books, so little
I
time.
like books all the time. Yeah, exactly.
I want to know what questions you all have. Joe and I could go on for a few more hours, but what questions do you all have? Yes, ma'am.
You started to say how, with the Oligarch story, we started with what would happen if this happened to a guy.
Yeah.
You ever start at the end saying, this horrific thing or wonderful thing happened, and when you're heading back to that space, you start from the behind and the down forward.
Yes, that's a good question. I do. I sort of think of my books. What?
Are you going to be the first?
Oh, I'll repeat the question, yeah. I start with the premise, but do I ever start with the ending? Basically, I work backwards. How someone ended up in this situation. And I do. I often think, I don't start writing a book until I have the ending figured out. And I think of my books when I'm starting off like a movie trailer, where I say, we have just the high points of the book. And I sort of think, how did she get to this situation at the end? Okay. And that's another way of setting up the book, and I do that as well.
And I'm sorry, I'll repeat the question too. Yes, Dan?
I read a lot of the same authors, and they all have scenes where there's like total mayhem.
Yeah.
And I want to know how real that is. I mean, I don't shoot guns, I don't nice people. I just, you're going through this and you're saying to yourself, can this be real?
Right. The question
How do you
is,
do that?
the total mayhem that comes in books, how do you do that, and how is it real? Because this lady does not shoot guns or hold knives. Don't do that stuff.
So I knew that if I wrote a scene that involved guns, I would have to learn how to shoot a gun. So I now own several different kinds of guns, and I have my sources who tell me how a gunfight really happened, as opposed to what you see on TV or in movies. So this kind of thing doesn't really happen in real life. This kind of scenes of great mayhem. But some books call for that kind of action scene. So I talk to my sources and make them feel as real as possible.
This lady right here.
What thought process you use to decide whether you're going to write a standalone versus the sceneries?
What thought process does Joe use to decide series or standalone?
It's the premise. And some premises can only work as standalone. Like, to give you an example, regular person's life is turned upside down for one reason or another. That's not going to work in the series. In the series, as I said, the main character has got to be an investigator, figuring something out, uncovering the truth. So these are very different kinds of stories. So that determines whether it's a series or something.
And you need to start this before he was required to write.
I just had this before I started to write exactly.
This lady in green, Dr.
I read the book and I loved it. And I want to know, are you in the process, and you mentioned some projects you're working on currently, but
Yes.
are you in the process of starting another standalone book?
Is he going to put it?
Yeah, she asked if I'm in the process of starting another standalone. No, the next book is the beginning of the series.
Probably promise.
Yes. I've got my characters figured out, and I've got the situation figured out pretty much. I just have to sort of get my butt in the chair and sit in front of the computer and write it out.
Will we look forward to that next year?
Yeah.
So that'll be exciting. Yeah.
Sure, next year.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, on Oligarch, the word has become very common.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm just wondering what you think about American oligarchs we hear about now, let's face it.
Yes. She said the oligarch, the word oligarch is all of a sudden popular.
Excellent.
Good timing for my book.
Yeah.
You know what's interesting? There's a difference between American oligarchs like Elon Musk and Russian oligarchs. The Russian oligarchs made Putin president of Russia. They really elected him. They put their money behind him. They campaigned. They had biographies written of him. But shortly after Putin came to power, he called the richest men in Russia in and told them, stay in your own lane. If you get involved in politics, there will be consequences.
He arrested one of them.
He arrested several oligarchs and put them in the gulag for 10 years on grounds of corruption. So the oligarchs in Russia no longer exercise political power. But the oligarchs in the U.S. do. That's taken.
Listen up. Your books that became movies.
Yeah.
Were you happy when the was their outcome? Or about with the check?
I was happy with the check, yeah. I think of movies as being billboards for books. Because my main job is to write the book, not to write the movie. I liked high crimes a lot. I didn't like Paranoia so much, even though it had Harrison Ford and Gary Oldman and Liam Hemsworth. The script wasn't right, in my opinion. But as some of you may know, I actually have a cameo in High Crossing. The director invited me to be a JAG officer in High Crossing. I said, great, I'll go to Grady Cuts right now and have my head shaved. He said, no. You gotta have the costume, we'll do it. So he said, but the one deal I want to make with you is, I don't want you to tell people that you wrote the book, because that's gotta just be distracting.
Make people on set.
On set, yeah. And don't talk to those movie stars, please. I said, all right. There I am, I'm in 5 scenes. And at one point, I see Morgan Freeman talking to some other guy during the break. I thought to myself, I've got to meet Morgan Freeman. So I went up to him and said, excuse me, Mr. Freeman, I just wanted to introduce myself. My name is Joe Fender. I wrote the book, The Movie Space Time. Morgan Freeman gave me this long, stony look and turned to the guy next to him and said, so this gentleman here says he wrote the book, The Movie Space Time, like, I give a shit.
And the blood rushed to my head. They said, "Excuse me for daring to interrupt the movie star." And he went, "Ha ha, I got you." He was just having fun with me. He turned out to be a very cool guy. Yeah. So Oligarch is a nice guy, I promise you.
Other questions? Yes, ma'am, in front.
How long did it take you to write this book? And is there an average time that you spend on any particular book?
How long did it take me to write this book, and is there an average time I spend in a particular book? This book took me 2 years to. I normally write a book within a year. I can write a book within 6 or 8 months, I would say, and there's energy involved. But Oligarch's Daughter involved a lot of Russian research, involved a lot of God research, and I spent a lot of time making sure that that love story felt as authentic and plausible as possible. So this book just took me longer, and I think it shows. I hope it shows.
It's good.
Okay, other questions? And yellow man?
It's great.
It is great.
Oh, this thing.
So, you mentioned good. You said they wrote these in your office.
Yes.
Knowing that they do much more, I need a lot of astronauts.
Yeah. Yes, I was. My wife was particularly upset about this. You know, our daughter was living at home at the time, and we just thought, what could happen?
Right.
The FBI guy came over and told me not to visit Moscow. He said they will probably arrest you.
What?
And even though I'm just a writer, that doesn't make a difference.
What you say?
So I said, okay, I'm not going to Moscow anymore.
And is.
And I don't have the Wall Street Journal behind me the way Emmett Gershkovich did.
You know.
So I didn't want to find out what could happen if I got arrested. No thanks.
Yeah, with the you know.
Or the lady in red should have a question. Do you have a question?
Yeah. Well, I was surprised with the ending.
I don't I can talk to you about this later, but I do not want to recommend it for anybody. Thank you.
That was great.
Okay, I can't do that. All right,
I want
well,
the book to be longer.
Yeah.
Okay.
I get it.
Okay.
It's a fast-moving book.
Maybe get back with you. I know there was somebody over on this side. Oh, yes, ma'am. Or sir, I'm sorry. You.
A standalone book. Have you ever had one where you really wanted to get back to that character and do another one, and you didn't really think of it when you wrote it? It was going to be standalone, but now you kind of fell in love with this character or whatever, and you wanted to continue.
Well, I really wanted to do more of Paul. I really bonded with this character. But
The canons.
for a lot of reasons, it doesn't make sense to me. So with the standalones, I may fall in love with the character, but I usually do not plan to listen on his book.
Right.
Gentlemen agree that.
I'm just sad that and now want your books to get old.
Right.
Last month certainly does interested you to maybe get a little more current and be due to the situation and in the world.
Yeah. The situation in the world is always giving me ideas. And I am fascinated by American oligarchs and the power that they now exert. And I worry about it, to be honest. But I think of my books as being escapism. I don't want people reading the book to sort of feel that they're too much invested in current events. I want it to feel like an escape from the world, as much as possible.
We should have no escape.
And so 20 years from now, people can pick up our books and say, oh yeah, he knew what he was talking about. This is what's happening now.
Right. To deal with it, yeah.
Other questions? Yeah.
Way back there.
In the back.
I'd like your thoughts on how the book business has changed, say, in the past 5 years.
how the book business has changed. Hey, Andrew, how you doing? It's changed in some interesting ways. First of all, there's this big trend for books called romantasy books. Romance plus fantasy. I don't read it. Those are very, very popular. It becomes very, very popular. There are more bookstores opening now than there used to be. I was afraid that we were seeing the end of the bookstore. Or the Amazon came along. But people are realizing the importance of being able to go into a bookstore, talk to the bookseller, get a word-of-mouth recommendation, and browse among the books, which you cannot do on Amazon. Amazon, if you know what book you want to order, you go in and you order that book. But you really can't browse. So the advent of more bookstores is interesting. Social media has become more and more important in selling of books. And I got to tell you, I'm on Facebook, I'm on Twitter, I'm on Blue Sky, I'm on Instagram, and I have to be careful about wasting my time on social media. When my job is to write a book, not to be tweeting all the time. So the book business has changed a lot in the last 20 years.
And my idea that reviewing has also changed.
Yes.
I mean, I work for legitimate publications. There's also a lot of bloggers out there. Some are good, and some just want a free book, and they have an agenda. And I also would not trust any Amazon review.
Yeah.
I know someone whose husband once published a book, and she wrote 5 or 6 glowing reviews on Amazon, best book ever, and then they got divorced, and yeah, it's really easy. Any other questions? I think we have time for 2 more. Yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to say some good news, that good news about TikTok, which you wouldn't think. But on TikTok, they recommended books, and there are going to be 60 new Barnes and Noble stores open, which is a very good thing.
It is good. More bookstores, more real bookstores. Even though they're Barnes and Noble, which once you were afraid to drive, and then sorry,
And I love the independent bookstores too.
Yeah.
I hope if any of them can, you can buy books at the back. I think we may have one more question or Christina comes up to take over. Any other questions?
Over there. I know that the several authors, I don't know if you write those types of books. A lot of authors now, if they write a book and they didn't live it, they get criticized and there's been a lot of backlash. You know, like American Jarts and Jar Hotel, and they want this religion attack because they're not that cold.
Right.
After you met it, that's before your books are not.
I have. So she said that authors are often getting attacked for writing something where they didn't live that, didn't have that lived experience.
Right. Oh, there's some sort of that culture.
Right.
Where it's about immigrants.
Yeah.
It wasn't a Mexican immigrant.
Right. So I have not run into that problem, but I can tell you, I think it was so stupid.
Right.
Literally, you know? I write characters who are women. I'm not a woman. In fact, I write characters who are assassins. I'm not an assassin.
It's fiction.
It's fiction. You made that up.
It's experience. You know, that kind of experience.
Right. That's just great.
There is another event next Saturday, which I think Christina can tell us about. I want to thank you all for coming and thank Joe. Next week.
Yeah, like Oline said, we have events going all the way through April. We have about 4 more for February. The next one will be next Saturday, Justin Ruckelin. She will be moderating as well. Please, if you're interested in buying a book and you want to support independent booksellers, we do have copies for sale. And thank you all for coming. Have a great weekend.